All right, just as he said he would do, Donald Trump signs an executive order today banning men from competing in women's sports. This is something that's near and dear to me, something I've been fighting for and talking about for years now. This all began with Barack Obama and skewing Title IX to include somehow men being allowed to play in women's sports, men being allowed to go into the women's locker room. And it's been disgusting and disgraceful. And let's be honest, this is not about keeping men out of the girls' bathroom. This is about keeping mental illness out of the girls' bathroom. We should not be placating to this very small majority in our country that needs mental help. They don't need to be put into situations where they're going to be failing. They don't need to be put into situations that could endanger the lives of others. They need to be taken care of in mental institutions. And the parents that put these kids through this stuff should be sent to Bellevue because they're nuts. And this is finally some common sense coming. You see all of these women, all of these young girls surrounding President Donald Trump in the White House today as he signs this common sense executive order and gets rid of this poisonous ideology. Now, I will say this. There is going to be, in a very short period of time in this country, a lot of young Americans who are going to have no one to help them out because they have decided to transition or they decided to get gender-affirming care and mutilate their bodies because it was the cool thing to do. It was the fad thing to do. It was something that their liberal parents told them would be a good thing to do. But now as we see that the Democrats got destroyed in the elections, they're starting to drop all the pronouns from their bios. They're trying to disassociate with the LGBTQ movement, right? This entire transgender movement. They're going to drop it like a wet towel because they realize it's not a winning issue at the polls. And what's going to happen? Who is going to be left behind? All of these young people that they've convinced to cut off their breasts, cut off their private parts, and mutilate themselves where they're in a position that they can no longer have children as they grow up. Who is going to be there to pick up the pieces for these kids? And this is why I believe detransitioner stories are so important so they can get out there and warn of the dangers of this. But let's face it, this is a mental illness problem that we have in this country, and it's being forced onto the American people by the mainstream media and these left-wing radicals to convince these young people that this is a good thing to do. Now, what we've done is we've put actual girls at risk and have forced them to compete against these lunatics that are showing up in their lockers and showing up at their practices. This should never happen in the United States of America. Where are the people that stand up for women's rights? Where are they all when it comes to this issue? They never discuss it. They don't want to talk about it. They always want to say, oh, we're for women this or women that. What about the women who are being forced to play against men in sports? What about the women that are forced to have to share a locker room with a dude? It's been ridiculous. I have not found, again, in real life, I have not come across a single person who thinks this is a good idea, let alone find a parent that I have talked to anywhere, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican, that thinks it's a good idea to allow men to go into women's sports or men into women's locker rooms or even men into women's prisons. These are the stupidest things we've ever heard of. And imagine we have to get to a point in our country where the president of the United States has to get up there and sign an executive order to prevent it from happening. And of course, they're going to call it transphobic today. They're going to say, this is against the LGBTQ. No, this is pro-women. That's what this entire executive order is about. It's about lifting women up. We want women to have their own sports. We want them to be able, there's a reason why this only goes one way, and we don't see women competing in men's sports. We don't see it go the other way. We only see it the other way around. We see men who fail in certain sports. They're 500 on the track team. They go to the women's transfer and become a woman, and now they're the number one track runner. We've seen it in swimming. Riley Gaines has been speaking about this for years. I've had her on the podcast here. She's been a big advocate for women, and it's about time somebody stands up for the women in this country. It's about time somebody stands up for the parents in this country who have been fighting for their girls. Right? I'm a father of a young girl. Today is a day to celebrate for parents. It's a win, and we have got to keep the pedal to the metal and make sure this mental illness stays out of our society because, you know what? There's a place for this. There's a place to have treatment and to console people that are suffering from gender dysphoria, whatever the issues may be. But it's not to try to pretend like they're the ones that are right and we're the ones that are crazy. It doesn't work that way, okay? We recognize that there's a certain portion of the population that is suffering from this mental illness, needs to be helped and treated, not mocked, but they need to be helped. They don't need to be put into society and told, you're right, everybody else is crazy. And if they tell you that you're wrong, they're transphobic. They've turned everything on its head. Everybody sees this. This is a huge part of the reason why Donald Trump is the president of the United States today, is because they thought that shoving this stuff down your throat was going to somehow be a good thing for them. And it turns out it was a disaster for them. Also, while signing this executive order today, President Donald Trump says, we are putting every school receiving taxpayer dollars on notice. If you let men take over women's sports teams or invade your locker rooms, you will be investigated for violations of Title IX and risk your federal funding. There will be no federal funding. This has to be a hard, strong message. Now, of course, you're going to have some of these left-wing schools, left-wing principals, left-wing coaches try to fight against this and try to virtue signal to the LGBT community. We see this all the time. But make no mistake, there will be people on top of this right now, because you know what? The best part of this is people are not afraid anymore to say, hey, this is wrong. This is not okay. I don't want to put my daughter in this situation. I don't want my girl to have to share a bathroom with this boy. And it's amazing that we have to say it, but it has to be said, and it has to be rooted out of our society. And this is a huge, huge step in the right direction. Common sense returning to America. Power to the parents, and God bless our women and our young girls in this country that no longer have to worry about a president who is going to be putting and sticking up for the mental illness that's been invading their locker rooms, invading their sports for the last 4 years. It comes to an end today with this executive order, and I applaud President Donald Trump.
You're listening to the Alec Show. The future is family.